tell you something about first impressions. They say you only get one, that the universe hands you a single opening frame, carefully lit, perfectly timed, and the rest of your life radiates outward from that moment like light from a cracked door. They make it sound elegant, intentional. Nobody tells you that sometimes your first impression involves a large iced coffee, a flight of stone steps, 40 witnesses, and the most devastatingly composed woman you have ever encountered in your 18 years of otherwise unremarkable existence. Nobody tells you that sometimes the universe doesn't give you a frame. It gives you a collision. My name is Mia Calloway, and this is the story of how I fell, quite literally, into the orbit of Nora Whitfield, and how that orbit slowly, quietly, completely remade the shape of my world. It was the first morning of the first day of my first year at Hartwell University, and I was already 40 minutes late to freshman orientation because the campus map included in my welcome packet appeared to have been drawn by someone who had only heard the word campus described secondhand, possibly through a wall. I had been circling the central quad for 20 minutes of increasingly frantic loops, my tote bag, which read "I'm fine" in ironic block letters, because 18-year-old me thought that was a personality. Swinging from my shoulder, my very full iced coffee slowly warming in my hand, the useless map crumpling more with each pass. I had chosen communications as my major because, honestly, I had no better plan. I wanted to understand how people said things and meant other things. How words could carry entire rooms of feeling without spilling. What I understood in that moment, walking in circles beneath a pale September sky, was that I couldn't even communicate my location to myself using a printed map. Eventually, I abandoned strategy entirely and did what desperate people do. I followed the crowd. The largest visible cluster of human beings was gathered near the steps of a grand stone building at the north edge of campus. Caldwell Hall, I would later learn, main academic building, most photographed structure on campus, unofficial throne room of Nora Whitfield. I didn't know any of that yet. What I knew was that the crowd had formed a kind of natural bottleneck at the base of the steps, and I was late and I had momentum. And social anxiety has a peculiar way of converting itself into forward motion when there are no better options available. I squeezed between two people, apologized to a third, pivoted around someone's enormous rolling suitcase cart, and then, with the horrible, crystalline clarity that only genuine disaster offers in the moment before impact, I ran directly into something solid, warm, present, utterly immovable. My foot caught the edge of the bottom step. The world tilted. I pitched forward. She turned at exactly, precisely, cosmically the wrong moment, and our mouths collided. For one suspended, catastrophic instant, our lips touched. Then my iced coffee went fully sideways, an arc of cold liquid cascading down between us, and I grabbed the nearest available handhold, which turned out to be the lapel of a cream-colored blazer. And we were pressed together on the steps of Caldwell Hall, and people were watching, and the coffee was everywhere, and time had simply ceased to function normally. I stumbled back, grabbed the railing, looked up. She was tall, dark hair drawn back in a precise, severe knot at the nape of her neck, not a single strand out of place despite, I noted with horror, my hand having just been on her jacket. She wore the blazer, cream, ruined, over a black turtleneck, and her eyes were gray in a way that didn't feel like a color so much as a weather condition. Overcast, controlled. The sky before something enormous happened. She was looking at me with an expression so perfectly composed that I genuinely could not determine whether she was going to call the police, issue a formal complaint, or simply dissolve me on the spot using only the focused weight of her gaze. A coffee stain was spreading slowly down the front of her blazer. I said, which was not my finest opening. She said nothing. "I am so sorry," I managed. I tripped. That was completely accidental. I was trying to get to orientation and I had the map, but the map is wrong. It's genuinely wrong. Someone made a serious error on that. "You have coffee on your face," she said. Her voice was low and meticulous, each word measured before release, like she had a personal policy against verbal waste. I touched my cheek. There was, in fact, coffee on my face. Somewhere behind me, someone laughed. The sound rippled outward, and with it came something else. A name passed through the crowd in a hushed, reverent current, off the way people say the names of storms. Nora Whitfield. Oh my God, did she just... I looked back at this woman with the ruined blazer and the gray eyes, and the expression of someone who had never in their life been surprised by anything, until apparently 30 seconds ago. "I'll pay for the dry cleaning," I said very sincerely. "I'll pay for everything. I'm so genuinely..." She reached into her bag, removed a folded linen handkerchief. An actual linen handkerchief, the kind I thought only existed in period dramas. Pressed it once to her lapel with quiet efficiency, and walked up the steps without another word. The crowd parted for her like water parts for something that has always known where it's going. I stood at the bottom of those steps, soaked, holding the corpse of my iced coffee, staring after her. A girl materialized at my elbow, bright red glasses, an expression of pure, delighted devastation on my behalf. "Okay," she said. "So, do you know who that was?" Her name was Priya. She became my best friend in approximately 6 hours, which is about how long it took her to explain. Over orientation, over lunch, over the walk back to the dorms, and again over dining hall pasta. Exactly who Nora Whitfield was. Student council president, top of every class she'd ever sat in. Pre-law, full academic scholarship, had interned at a downtown firm at 17, won a regional debate championship 3 consecutive years before she'd even set foot on a university campus. Her father was a judge. Nope, she had been on the cover of the campus magazine the previous year in a black dress, and an expression that suggested she found the entire photo shoot mildly beneath her. She had turned down the captain of the university lacrosse team in front of the entire student union. She had never, to the collective knowledge of the campus, had a relationship of any kind. She did not attend parties. She attended extra lectures, voluntarily, for subjects she wasn't enrolled in. "She is basically a myth," Priya said, gesturing with her fork. "A very elegant, very frightening myth. And you kissed her." "I did not kiss her. It was an accidental collision of faces." "Your mouths touched, in front of like 40 people." "I know. It's already in the group chat." I put my face in my hands. "Which group chat?" Priya turned her phone toward me. There was a photograph, slightly blurred with distance, but unmistakable. Me, stumbling forward, one hand on Nora Whitfield's lapel, our faces close enough that nobody looking at it would immediately understand that this was not intentional. I looked at it for a long moment. "I need to transfer schools," I said. "You've been here 8 hours. I've ruined everything." Priya tilted her head with the patience of someone who had already decided something. "Or," she said, "you are now the most talked about freshman on campus," which is another way to look at it. I did not want to be the most talked about freshman on campus. I had wanted to be comfortable, medium-sized, unremarkable, to learn things and make friends and accumulate 4 years of quiet, pleasant memories without incident. That had been the plan. Oh, it was now structurally unsound. That night I lay on my new dorm bed staring at the ceiling, and I thought about the way she had looked at me before she walked away. Not with irritation, not with embarrassment. Something more considered than either, as though she were filing me into a category she hadn't yet labeled. As if I were a variable she hadn't accounted for and wasn't entirely sure what to do with. I told myself firmly to forget it. I told myself that Hartwell was a large university and our paths would never naturally cross again. She was a third-year pre-law student council president who owned linen handkerchiefs and attended voluntary lectures. I was a first year with a wrong map and a tote bag that said, "I'm fine." These were not intersecting orbits. I saw her the next morning. She was in my communications theory class. I walked through the door, scanned the room out of reflex, and found her immediately. 3rd row, laptop open, posture so precise it made the rest of the room look like it was slouching. The specific quality of her stillness was different from other people's stillness. It had authority in it. I turned directly around to walk back out. I walked into the doorframe instead. The impact was audible. The professor looked up. Several students turned around. And Nora Whitfield, who had been reading something on her screen, looked over her shoulder. Her eyes found mine with no difficulty whatsoever, as if she had known I was there before I walked in. She turned back to her screen. I found a seat in the back row, 4 rows behind her, and spent the entire 75-minute lecture in a state of acute, involuntary awareness, acutely aware of the line of her shoulders, the precise angle of her head when she was listening to something she found interesting, the way she occasionally wrote something in the margin of her notes with a focus that made it look important. I absorbed approximately 12% of the lecture content. After class, I gathered my things fast and made for the door. I was almost there. Calloway! My name, spoken with that low, deliberate precision, in that specific voice, stopped my feet before my brain had processed the instruction to stop. I turned slowly. The room was emptying around us. She was standing at the end of her row, bag over one shoulder, watching me with her characteristic, unreadable calm. "You know my name," I said, which was admittedly not the most articulate sentence I had ever produced. "It was in the group chat," she said, "along with everything else." I felt my face go warm. "I really am sorry about yesterday. About the coffee and the—" I made a vague gesture in the air intended to communicate the accidental kiss, and instead looked like I was swatting at an invisible insect. "All of it." "It happened," she said simply. "I'm not interested in discussing it further." A pause, clean and deliberate. "I am interested in whether you did the Carrie reading before today's lecture." I blinked. The required reading?" "Yes." "What did you make of it?" I stared at her. I had been prepared for irritation, for formal distance, for a politely worded cease and desist of my existence in her vicinity. I was not prepared for a seminar discussion. "No, I thought his model of communication as performance was convincing up to a point," I said slowly, because apparently my mouth had decided to continue functioning even while my brain was rebooting from scratch. "But he doesn't really account for the way intention and reception diverge in practice. You can perform something perfectly and still be completely misunderstood." She looked at me for a moment. Something moved in her expression. Too quick to name, a brief current beneath the surface of all that control. "Interesting," she said, and walked out. I stood in the empty classroom for a full 30 seconds. Then I followed, into a semester that was quietly beginning to rearrange itself around her. The next 2 weeks were a particular kind of exquisite torture. I saw Nora everywhere, not because she was seeking me out, but because she simply occupied the campus's most significant spaces with the natural ease of someone who understood architecture, and I had become involuntarily, helplessly attuned to her presence. My nervous system registered her before my eyes did, a change in the quality of a room, a slight shift in the air. In the communications seminar, she sat 3 rows ahead and asked questions that made the professor brighten like someone had turned up the lights. Her voice, low and precise, moved through the room differently from everyone else's. It had weight to it. I took more notes when she spoke. I couldn't help it. In the library, she occupied the same corner table every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, with a consistency that suggested she had either reserved it contractually or the table itself had simply accepted its fate. Once in the hallway near the science building, she gave me a brief, measured nod as we passed. The kind you give someone you know but haven't fully categorized yet. Acknowledgement without declaration. I walked into a trash can, watching her go. She saw that too. The campus had not forgotten the photograph. If anything, it had taken on a kind of mythological weight. I was now the girl who kissed Nora Whitfield, which was simultaneously more and less accurate than anyone understood. A boy in my sociology class asked me about it with the reverence of someone inquiring how I had survived a lightning strike. Priya treated the whole situation like the best ongoing entertainment she had ever encountered, providing running commentary with the enthusiasm of a sports commentator. "No, she keeps talking to you," Priya said one afternoon in the campus cafe, stirring her coffee with the pointed calm of someone making a legal argument. "She doesn't talk to people, Mia. She barely acknowledges the existence of most of campus. She asked me about a reading assignment. Once. She remembered your name from the group chat." "The group chat had my name in it." Priya looked at me with infinite patience. "She remembered your name." I stirred my own coffee and said nothing, because the truth was that I had been thinking about Nora Whitfield at a frequency that was beginning to genuinely interfere with my academic functioning, and I was not prepared to say that aloud where it could become a solid, real, undeniable thing. She found me in the library 3 weeks into term. I was surrounded by communications theory notes in 4 different colors, none of the sentences complete, the beginning of what I privately recognized as a full-scale panic spiral about my first essay assignment. I had been at this table for 2 hours. The notes were getting worse, not better. Each new attempt more scattered than the last, the pen moving faster as the ideas clarified less. I heard a chair pull out across from me. I looked up. Nora set her bag down and opened her laptop with the absolute composure of someone who had not just selected my specific table in a library containing approximately 50 empty alternatives. She didn't look up. She didn't explain. She simply sat as though this were an arrangement that had always been in place. "There are other tables," I said. "Well, I'm aware." She didn't look up from her screen. I looked at my notes. I looked at her. "Did you need something?" "I'm working." A beat. "You look like you're panicking." "I'm not panicking." "Your notes are in 4 colors and none of the sentences are finished." I looked at my notes. This was entirely accurate. I said nothing. "The Hartley essay?" she asked. "Yeah." She turned her laptop slightly toward me. On the screen was an essay outline. Clean, organized, each element positioned with the efficiency of someone who found chaos genuinely offensive. "Your argument about performative communication from last week," she said, "the one about intention and reception. That was a stronger thesis than anything you're building from those notes." She pointed to the outline. "Start with your original claim. Use Hartley as the complicating factor. Return to your point with a real example." I looked at the outline. Something inside my chest shifted, like a key turning in a lock I hadn't known was stuck. "Thank you," I said, and meant it completely. "You're welcome." She turned her laptop back and returned to her work. We sat across from each other for 2 hours. The library settled into its late afternoon quiet around us. She didn't speak again, except once, without looking up. She slid a bottle of water across the table toward me. I had been rubbing my eyes for the past several minutes. "Thank you," I said again, softer this time. She didn't respond, but she didn't move away either. When I finally stood to leave, I had 400 words of the best essay I had produced since arriving at Hartwell. I walked back to the dorms through the early evening cool with the strange, spreading warmth in my chest of someone who has been seen clearly for the first time by a pair of eyes she didn't expect to be paying attention. I realized, in serious trouble. The rain came fast, the way autumn rain comes on the eastern side of the country, sudden and total, as if the sky had been waiting for the worst possible moment to make its move. I was caught on the far side of campus after a communication society meeting ran long, completely without an umbrella, my phone's weather app confirming cheerfully that yes, it was in fact raining, which was information I already had. I ducked under the overhang of the arts annex and pulled my jacket tighter and thought about making a run for it. Callaway? 10 feet away, and under the same narrow overhang, stood Nora Whitfield, a slim umbrella in her hand, looking at the rain with the mild, composed expression of someone who found this inconvenient but not destabilizing. "Oh," I said. "Hi. You don't have an umbrella." "I have an umbrella. It's in my room." Her gaze moved to me, level and dry. "That's not what having an umbrella means." "I know that." She looked at me for a moment. Then she held the umbrella out, the gesture clean and direct and without ceremony, as though the decision had been made before the words were necessary. "You'll get wet," I said. "I can wait. I have a hood." I looked at the dark coat she was wearing, the large hood currently pushed back off her head because she was standing under a covered overhang and had not yet needed it. "I can't take your umbrella, Nora." "Don't argue with me about an umbrella." The corner of her mouth. Not quite a curve, the ghost of one. "Take it." I reached out and took the handle. Our fingers overlapped in the transfer, brief and warm in the damp cold, and neither of us moved immediately. She was very close. The overhang was narrow, and the rain was pulling the world in at the edges, and I could smell something clean and faint from the warmth of her. Cedar, paper, something specific and hers. Her gray eyes were darker in the low pre-storm light, the color of the sky just before something opened up, and she was looking at me with that careful, contained expression I had spent weeks trying to read like a language I didn't have the textbook for. The moment held itself very still. "Thank you," I said, and my voice came out quieter than I intended. Softer. Like something I hadn't meant to hand over. Something shifted in her face. Small and fast, there and then gone, like light moving on water. She pulled her hood up, stepped out into the rain with her characteristic composure, as though precipitation were something that happened to other people, and she was simply passing through it as a courtesy. She walked away without looking back. I stood under the overhang holding her umbrella, my heart doing something complicated and architectural, like it was quietly building a room it didn't have blueprints for. That evening, Priya sat on the edge of my bed with her hands folded and her expression intensely focused, like a detective being handed a key piece of evidence. "She gave you her umbrella," Priya said. "She had a hood, Mia. And she let herself walk into the rain so you wouldn't have to." I pressed my face into my pillow. The pillow muffled whatever I said next, which was somewhere between "I know" and "please don't make me say it out loud." "She likes you," Priya said, in the tone of someone delivering a verdict. I had, by this point, accepted it about myself. I was falling for Nora Whitfield the way you fall into deep water. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in steady increments that eventually add up to completely and over your head. It was nothing like the comfortable, distance-maintained admiration of high school, nothing like the safe and theoretical. This was specific and daily and entirely involuntary. I noticed the way she held her pen, 2 fingers slightly offset from the barrel, like she'd developed her own system. And I noticed the small tilt of her head when something in a lecture caught her genuine interest. I noticed the almost smile that lived at the corner of her mouth, and occasionally, briefly, made it all the way to her face before she caught it and withdrew it, like she had a policy about letting people see her pleased. But Nora Whitfield was untouchable. That was the word that kept surfacing when I let myself think about it too directly. She existed on a plane the rest of campus looked up at. She had built something precise and self-contained around herself, and it was magnificent and formidable, and not something I could simply walk into, even if I had, technically, already done exactly that once. I was probably reading too much into it. That was what I told myself. The kindness in the library. Efficient, practical. And the umbrella. Logistical. The way she sometimes lingered after seminar until I'd gathered my things, and we'd walk out of the building together in a silence that felt, to me, like a particular kind of warmth. I was assigning meaning to proximity. I was a first year who had stumbled into her life on the first day of term, and apparently lodged there by accident, the way a song gets stuck in your head. I told myself this firmly, right up until the night of the Student Union Gala. The gala was the major autumn event, organized by Student Council, which meant Nora had probably run the logistics with the same quiet efficiency she applied to everything else. The hall looked genuinely beautiful. Low warm light, the kind that makes everything feel like a memory while it's happening. And Mas Priya had practically installed me in a green dress and done my eyeliner and told me firmly that I was a person who deserved good things. I felt okay. I felt nervous, but okay. I did not feel okay when I walked in and found Nora across the room. Her hair was down, dark waves past her shoulders. The first time I had ever seen it like that, and it undid something in my chest with alarming speed. She was in a black dress that suggested whoever had designed it understood exactly what it was for. A man I didn't recognize was leaning toward her with the unmistakable body language of someone who had very high confidence in his own chances. I got a drink from the bar and committed myself to talking to other people. I managed 8 minutes. Then Priya appeared at my elbow with an expression I didn't like. "Okay," she said, low and careful. "I need to tell you something, and I need you not to react visibly." "What?" "There's a rumor going around." She paused. "About you. And a bet." The drink in my hand went still. "What kind of bet?" Priya's voice was quiet and gentle, the way people are gentle when they're handing you something with sharp edges. "2 different people tonight. The story is that Nora being friendly with you, the library, the umbrella, all of it, was some kind of dare from the 3rd-year honors cohort, a joke about the freshman who kissed her on the first day, that she's been humoring you for entertainment." The gala music continued around me. I could hear all of it and none of it. I looked across the room at Nora. She was still talking to the man who was leaning toward her. but her eyes were moving through the room in their habitual, quiet sweep. For a fraction of a second, they found mine. She went very still. I looked away. I set down my drink. I told Priya I needed air. The corridor outside the hall was cool and quiet. I walked to the far end and stood at a window and told myself, methodically, to be rational. Campus gossip invented narratives constantly. That was practically a campus industry. It didn't have to be true. But the thing about rumors is that they don't need to be entirely true to find every crack and land with full force. And this one had found every quiet insecurity I'd been carefully tending since the first day. Every thought I'd had about the distance between Nora Whitfield's world and mine, and about whether someone like her could ever genuinely mean the things her small, careful gestures seemed to mean. I was a joke, or I might be a joke, and the worst part was how much sense it made. Why else would she give me her attention? I was the girl with the wrong map and the coffee catastrophe. She was the myth, the cover story, the woman the crowd parted for. Footsteps in the corridor. I knew them before I turned. "You left," Nora said. I kept looking at the window. I needed air. It's a corridor. A pause. There's no air. Nora. I turned. In the dim hallway light, she looked, for the first time, less like something elevated and more like a person, and somehow that was harder, more precarious. "I'm fine." "You're not." She came to stand beside me, close, but not quite touching. "What happened?" I looked at her. I had spent weeks trying to decode her expression, and I was done trying to be careful about it. "Is it true?" I asked. The words came out quieter than I intended, with an edge I couldn't entirely smooth. "What people are saying, that all of this, the library, the umbrella, you talking to me, was because of some kind of bet, because of the photo, because I was a joke." "No." The word was flat and clean and absolute, like a door shutting. "No, that's not what this is." "Then what is it?" My voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I resented it. "Because I genuinely cannot read you, Nora. You look at me, and then you don't. You show up at my table in the library and give me your umbrella and your essay advice, and then you walk away like it doesn't mean anything. And I'm standing here trying very hard not to be an idiot about it." "Mia." My first name. She had not said my first name before. It stopped me completely. She looked away, at the wall, at the window, somewhere in the middle distance that didn't require eye contact. And for the first time since I'd known her, Nora Whitfield looked like someone who did not have a prepared answer. "I don't do this well," she said. "Any of this. People. Connection." A pause, searching. The ordinary texture of caring about someone. She looked down at her hands briefly, then back at the wall. "I am very good at control. I understand systems and arguments and strategies. I do not understand." She made a small gesture between us, precise and a little helpless. "This. Whatever this is. And I've been trying to understand it since you fell into me on those steps, and I am no closer to a clean answer, and that is not a state I am comfortable with." She looked at me, directly, without deflection. "But I know it isn't a joke," she said. "I know that when you're not in the seminar, I notice it. I know that the argument you made about intention and reception has come back to me every day since you said it. I know I gave you my umbrella because the idea of you walking home in the rain was—" She paused. The word that came next was careful, but what was behind it wasn't. "Unacceptable. That is not the vocabulary of someone who is humoring a campus punchline. I don't know what to do with it. But I know what it isn't." The corridor was very quiet. My heart was doing something it had never done before. Not pounding, not racing, but settling, like something coming to rest after a long fall. "Say something," she said. "You've been quiet for 20 seconds. "I'm just," I said slowly, trying to process the fact that Nora Whitfield just told me she notices when I'm not in a room. Something happened at the corner of her mouth. The almost smile arrived. Actually arrived. Small and controlled, as though she had decided deliberately to allow it. "It's inconvenient," she said. "For what it's worth," I said, and my voice was steadier now. You have been completely destroying my ability to focus on communications theory for 6 weeks. So, there's that." The smile grew by a fraction. I took one step toward her. She didn't step back. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to regardless." "That first day," I said, "on the steps, meet after the coffee, you looked at me for a long time before you said anything. What were you thinking?" She was quiet for a moment. The distant sound of the gala music continued, muffled and warm. "I was thinking," she said, "that you had the most genuinely mortified expression I had ever seen on a human face, and that you were still apologizing even though you had coffee on you, too." A pause. This one softer than her usual pauses, something different at the edges of it. "And that I had never been looked at the way you were looking at me. Not as a name or a reputation, just a person with ruined dry cleaning who might also be inconvenienced." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out warm and genuine and a little surprised. She watched me laugh with an expression I couldn't name. Something open in it. Something that looked, quietly, like relief. "Nora," I said when I'd stopped. "Yes." "I would very much like to actually kiss you on purpose." I held her gaze. "If that's—" "Yes," she said, before I'd finished the sentence. I crossed the remaining distance between us, and this time, when our lips met, it was nothing like the first time. It was slow and deliberate and warm, and she kissed me back with a precision that somehow also managed to be gentle. Her hand coming up to the side of my face, tilting me toward her, like she had been thinking carefully about exactly this and had decided to be thorough about it. Everything that had been tangled and uncertain and quietly aching for 6 weeks went very still. When we separated, she kept her hand against my face for a moment. Her gray eyes, close enough to read now, were softer than I had ever seen them. "Considerably better than the first time," I said. "The bar was low." The ghost of that smile again. "There was a great deal of iced coffee involved." "I want it noted," she said, "that I never blamed you for that. You stared at me like you were considering it." "I was considering several things." The corner of her mouth curved. "That was one of them." We walked back into the gala together. Priya saw us come through the door. She made a sound that could only be described as vindicated and then had to pretend she hadn't been watching, which she did very badly. Nora got us both water from the bar. She never drank at events, she told me. She needed to remember everything. We stood together against the far wall, and we talked for 2 hours. Really talked. The kind where you keep finding new threads and following them, where time operates under different rules. She told me about the debate competitions, and her father, and the years she'd spent not knowing what she wanted before she landed on law, and the way she'd built the precise, controlled version of herself as a response to a childhood that had been considerably less neat. She told me these things in the same direct, unadorned way she said everything. Without decoration, without managing what I would think of them. I told her about feeling ordinary, about choosing communications because it was the closest thing I could find to a course called How to Make Yourself Understood, about always feeling slightly adjacent to the right version of myself. She listened to all of it with the full, undivided attention that I was beginning to understand was one of the most disarming things about her. When Nora Whitfield listened, she was entirely there. No performance of it, just actual presence, her eyes on mine, absorbing every word as though it mattered. "You're not ordinary," she said when I wound down. "You're contractually required to say that." "I'm not contractually required to say anything. And I don't say things I don't mean. You know enough about me to know that." I looked at her. 6 weeks of trying to read her expression, and right now it was the most open I had ever seen it. And it was looking directly at me. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay," she agreed. The weeks after that had a different quality. Not simpler, exactly. Nora was still Nora. Still precise and guarded in public. I still the kind of person who would revise an essay 4 times before submitting something she was 90% satisfied with. Still occasionally alarming to the rest of the seminar with the accuracy of her questions. But there were private coordinates that were mine now. The specific way she turned her laptop screen toward me without being asked. The way she always replied to my texts within 3 minutes, despite loudly professing to find phones and interruption offensive. The way she kept my umbrella in her bag for weeks after the rain, because she told me plainly that I had demonstrated insufficient umbrella preparedness, and she wasn't leaving that to chance again. Campus still talked, of course. Gossip at Hartwell was essentially a living organism. Priya monitored it with proprietary satisfaction, while sending me screenshots with minimal commentary, usually a single exclamation mark. One evening, Nora found one of the screenshots on my phone when I left it on the cafe table. She read it with complete neutrality. "People have a great deal of time," she observed. "You are genuinely the most talked about person on this campus. Everything you do is news." "I find that exhausting." A pause. "Does it bother you that people know about us?" She considered the question honestly, the way she considered everything. "No," she said. "What happens between you and me is not diminished by other people knowing it exists. It isn't their business. But it isn't something I'm ashamed of." She paused. "Are you?" "No," I said immediately. "God, no. I've been telling Priya everything since day one. I'm the least subtle person alive." "I've noticed." She looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup. "It's one of the things I find—" She seemed to select the word deliberately. "Compelling." "Compelling." I repeated it slowly. "High praise from you." "It is, actually," she said, and she meant it. I had learned her language slowly and with attention, the way you learn a language you have decided is worth the effort, not because it is easy, but because everything it says matters. I had learned the mild deflections that meant she was feeling something she hadn't organized yet, the directness that other people read as coldness, and I now read as the most honest form of tenderness she had, deployed only when she was certain, when she had weighed it and decided it was worth saying without armor. The way she sometimes just sat beside me in the library, shoulder against mine, and didn't feel the need to fill the silence with anything at all. The way that silence felt, to me, like the most complete sentence. 4 months into term, sitting in the campus cafe with our notes overlapping across the table, the autumn outside deepening into early winter cold, the windows fogged softly with warmth. I looked up from my essay and looked at her, and thought about how strange and improbable all of it was. The stumble and the coffee and the photograph and the group chat and Priya's running commentary. The library table and the umbrella and the corridor outside the gala. "I have something to tell you," I said. She looked up from her screen. "I'm glad I dropped my coffee on you," I said. "Well, I know that's an objectively terrible thing to be glad about, but I am." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I took the blazer to the dry cleaner. That same afternoon." "I know. I offered to pay." "I know you did." She zipped her bag with her characteristic neat efficiency. "I never took it again after that." She looked at me, level and steady and entirely without deflection. "The stain is still there. I kept it." I stared at her. "You kept a ruined blazer." "I told you I don't say things I don't mean." I crossed the space between us and kissed her right there in the cafe. Softly, without any coffee involved, without stumbling or witnesses or disaster. Just me and her, and the quiet warmth of the cafe and the winter coming in at the windows. She kissed me back with that quiet thoroughness that still rearranged something in my chest every single time. When I pulled back, she was looking at me with the expression I had come to know as hers alone, open and steady and warm in a way the rest of campus didn't get to see. Reserved, I understood now, only for this. "Mia," she said. "Yeah. You were never ordinary." She said it the way she said everything that actually mattered, without ceremony, without hesitation, with the full weight of her attention behind it. "Not for a single day. You just hadn't found the right map yet." I laughed, and she smiled. A real one, the kind that reached her gray eyes and changed them completely, the way weather breaks open after days of waiting. Outside the cafe windows, the first snow of the season had begun to fall. Soft and unhurried, Ike settling over Caldwell Hall and its steps and the whole improbable, magnificent, badly labeled map of this campus, where I had stumbled in with a tote bag that said, "I'm fine," and a wrong map, and absolutely no plan whatsoever. And somehow, without intending to, without a single correct direction to follow, had landed in exactly the right place. I took her hand. She let me. We walked out into the snow together,